Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. We had some tech difficulties, so now we're all good. We're really grateful that you're here to learn this evening with CURE. My name is Nicole Alifanti, and I am one of the founders and the president of CURE, the Coalition for Understanding Racism Through Education. You can go to our website at learnwithcure.com to learn more about our volunteers here in Larchmont and Mamaroneck. CURE is a New York State recognized nonprofit, and our fiscal sponsor is the Larchmont and Mamaroneck Lions Club. And we are also partnering with LMC Media on these panels, and we're truly grateful for the work they do in our community. I'm here with CURE leader Ann Lobu. She was the president of the Board of Education here in Mamaroneck, and now she studies policy for education policy at Columbia University. The whole panel series is Ann's brainchild. I'm also so happy to introduce you to Gabby Blumberg. She's a new CURE leader, and she jumped in and gave many hours to put this panel together with Ann and myself. Gabby's new to Larchmont. She was looking for something to do in the community, and she found CURE. She has a background in impact investing, which basically means that she's worked with companies and investors of all sizes, and she's helped them do good in the world while making a profit. Her work was all about moving away from a system that prioritizes profit maximization at the expense of everything else to a more balanced, more equitable way of doing business. It seemed to Gabby, Ann, and me that engaging people in communities like ours, where there is so much prosperity, but also a deep lack of understanding around systemic inequity, it would be a good match for her skill set. The essential question through this panel series, and perhaps the recurring question throughout our country's history, is why should we collectively care about inequity, racism, and oppression if it was built long before us? And why do communities like ours see creating equity as a zero-sum game, or a move that might create a loss for us instead of a huge cultural and even economic long-term shift in gains? So CURE is here to learn about systemic racism and inequity alongside you, and to build community and to make change. So thank you so much for being here this evening. We know that COVID-19 has exacerbated inequity and shown us deeper truths about racism and our country and our own community. So I just want to leave with this quote, and I pretty much will say this every time because I think it's beautiful, and I'm a big fan of Isabel Wilkerson, who wrote The Warmth of Other Suns and Caste. And she says that she uses the analogy to an old house to describe our collective inherited racism. And she writes, "Not one of us was here when the house was built. Our immediate ancestors may have had nothing to do with it, but we are the heirs of whatever is right or wrong with it. We did not erect the uneven pillars or joists, but they are ours to deal with now." So I'm gonna hand things over to Gabby Blumberg, and we will move to our incredible panelists.
Great, thank you so much. Yes, I will be moderating tonight's panel. So thank you, Nicole, and hi, everyone. I am very excited about tonight's conversation. Nicole, Ann, and I have already learned so much from these panelists just from our prep calls that I know this is going to be a great discussion. Just one more thing before we get started. We can't see you tonight, but that doesn't at all mean that we don't want to hear from you. So to prove it, we want to kick off with a question to you, our attendees. So if you could please go to the chat box right now, and first make sure you select in the to field all panelists and attendees so we can all see. Otherwise, only the panelists will see what you have to say, and that won't be very helpful. And just let us know quickly why you're here today. What brings you to this conversation? I'm going to pause for just a second so you guys can gather your thoughts and maybe type something in there. Maybe you want to learn more about inequity in our town so you can learn how to take action. Maybe you yourself have experienced injustice and want to learn what can be done. Maybe you're like me, you're new to the area and want to get more involved in rectifying inequity on a local level. Great. So I hope you all will follow those brave people who went first, and look forward to reading those as we get started. So also, please, during this discussion, if you have any questions or comments, put them up in the chat. Remember to select panelists and attendees so we can all see them, and we will be sure to answer them after the panelist presentation. Okay, awesome. So let's get started. We're here tonight to talk about affordable housing. Home ownership is the archetypal symbol of the American dream. It's one of the main ways people can begin to build wealth in this economic system. Yet, Black and brown Americans have systematically been shut out of this opportunity due to racist and unconstitutional practices. This housing crisis is an issue that affects our own suburban community here in Larchmont and Mamaroneck. And tonight, we are honored to have 3 expert panelists with us. Blanca Lopez, if you could just give a wave so everybody knows who I'm talking about, is advisor on fair and affordable housing to the Westchester County Executive. Tiffany Zezula is the Deputy Director for the Land Use Law Center at Pace University School of Law. And Rich Nightingale is the President and CEO of Westhab. We have so much to talk about. We're going to learn about the current state of play, comprehensive plans, why they're crucial in tackling NIMBY-ism, and the challenges and opportunities of development. So Blanca, Tiffany, Rich, thank you all so much for being here. To begin, I would love for each of you to just take a minute or two to introduce yourselves, and then we can get started on the conversation. And maybe I'll throw it to Blanca. Let's start with you.
Sure, thank you. As I talk, I will also share my screen. Well, first of all, good evening to everyone, and I want to thank Gabby and Nicole and Anne for putting together this wonderful series of discussions, much needed discussions on housing. And I saw the video on the digital divide and how it impacts children. And then with immigration coming up soon. So I appreciate the work that you are doing to call attention to these issues. My name is Blanca Lopez, and I work for the County Executive, George Latimer. I focus primarily on fair and affordable housing throughout his administration, and I'm also a liaison to various county departments, such as our planning department, which is a lead department when it comes to housing, as well as Office for People with Disabilities, Emergency Services, the Department of Correction and Probation, and the Human Rights Commission. And in addition to fair and affordable housing, I do 2 additional initiatives, which one is coming to the end soon, which is the Census 2020 count. And I'm also leading the internal liaison committee for the Police Reform and Reimagining Task Force that is currently working on addressing the executive order that the governor signed, and that it's due next year, April 1st. So I do have a lot on my plate, but I must say that housing, especially affordable housing, has a special place in my heart. I come from the nonprofit world, and as a former housing counselor, I can certainly understand the crisis that are facing people. Even though there is an eviction moratorium, people are scared. Many tenants are scared of losing their homes. Many homeowners are scared of losing their homes to foreclosure. So I'll share my screen now and we can get started. Can everybody see it? Yep. Okay. And the information that I'm going to use in terms of the data comes from the housing needs assessment that the county, it was prepared by Pattern for Progress, and it was released in November of last year. So a lot of the data that the study uses focuses between 2000 and 2017. But unfortunately, under COVID, there's going to be additional numbers that will impact the greater need for affordable housing. But I just wanted to make sure that our viewers understand the time frame that we're talking about when I explain the data that I'll be providing. So what is affordable housing? The term affordable housing is used to describe, for the most part, housing for which the total cost of rent or a mortgage and utilities is at or below 30% of the household's gross income. In Westchester County, and just like in many parts of the country, housing prices have risen expeditiously, while wages have remained stagnant. For example, the average market rate for a 2-bedroom apartment in the county is $2,500, while the median renter's hourly wage rate is at $17.64. This amount equates to an annual salary of $36,690, and in reality, it's really a monthly income of a little over $3,000. So if you're already paying your rent at $2,500, there's very little left over for additional expenses for you and your family. Affordable housing opportunities expand for people at different income levels, from young adults to seniors who cannot afford market rate housing. Affordable housing provides ownership and rental opportunities and are developed using a variety of subsidies and or tax credits from programs run by HUD, by New York State through its Division of Homes and Community Renewal, and or county or municipalities. These housing units, specifically for developments that have county funds invested in these developments, they are affordable for at a minimum of 50 years. And to apply, households must qualify financially based on their income. In Westchester, affordable rental and homeownership opportunities are designed for households making between 60 to 80% of the county's area median income. And just to give you an idea of what I mean by that, it's for a family of 4. This is between households making $75,500 to $100,640. So why is affordable housing the #1 crisis facing the region? There are so many different challenges, unfortunately, but I just wanted to highlight a couple of them now. And obviously we can talk about them more as we have our panel discussion. So in the county, availability of land is scarce, and the cost of land to acquire and develop is expensive. Units that are for sale or to be rented to qualified households, we see that according to the Housing Action Council, which is a nonprofit designated by the county to perform the fair and affirmative marketing of these units, they find that 68.6% of households seeking these affordable housing opportunities are already living in Westchester County, and that for every unit of rental housing marketed, there are 23 applicant households applying for that same unit. Affordability gaps continue to expand for homeowners and renters. I mentioned in the previous slide that challenges facing renters trying to make ends meet with a $36,000 annual household income. And at 30% of their monthly income, their housing costs should be no more than $917. Yet each month they face a gap of $1,500 by trying to keep up with a rent costing $2,500. Similarly, for homeowners, the median housing price in the county is $635,000. In order to purchase one of these homes, one needs about $71,500 to close, which is usually represents a 5% down in closing costs. And this requires an annual income of $235,000. When you compare this to a family at 80% of the area median income, which is a family of 4 making about $93,000 a year, there is an affordability gap of $395,000. At 100% of the area median income, which is $117,000, the gap is $327,000. Another factor is the limited development potential in parts of the county. In much of the denser areas of the county, primarily in the cities and in the southern part of Westchester, it seems that every piece of land is already developed, and that the only way to really add units would be to build up. On the other hand, many areas in the northern part of the county where it looks like there may be potential for development, since there is more land available, their current infrastructure is not designed to handle additional housing developments. And also, we have to take into consideration that public transportation is extremely limited. Over time, we have seen a decrease and disinvestment in low to moderate income housing programs, which affects our county residents in need of public housing, Section 8, or rent stabilized apartments, such as the ETPA or Emergency Tenant Protection Act units. Just to give you an idea of the housing stock that we have with these respective types of housing, there are 2,476 public housing units, and the average wait list for these units range from approximately 41 months in the White Plains Housing Authority to 21 months in the Portchester Housing Authority. With respect to Section 8 housing voucher holders, there are currently 13,109 of these vouchers. The average wait list for Section 8 apartments from CVR, which is the nonprofit that, or the organization that oversees Section 8 in municipalities that don't have local Section 8 offices, the average wait list is between 8 to 10 years. And in the town of Mamaroneck, for example, it is approximately 16 months. And for rent stabilized units, there are currently 34,221 of these ETPA units. Going back between 2015 and 2018, the number of ETPA units dropped by 3,000 due to destabilization. That represents a 10% decline. And if the trend continues, ETPA units will disappear in the next 35 years. Over time, as we see a change in demographics, changes in housing needs come with it. And as we wrap up Census 2020, we're going to see additional changes and additional demand for different types of housing once the 2020 census data is released in the next couple of years. The county's population of seniors is growing and diversifying fast. The aging population is increasing steadily. Close to 19% of the county's population will be over the age of 65. The greatest growth of population is in the 80 and over cohort, which we would see as the frail elderly. And between 2000 and 2017, there has been a 44% increase in this cohort. We also see more people who are living alone and are deciding to live alone, and the size of immediate families have declined over time. So there is a great disconnect between the need for smaller housing units, for housing units for the frail elderly or the elderly in general, and the current housing stock that we have. And most interestingly, we see that within that same time frame between 2000 and 2017, the 30 to 44 age cohort shows a decline. And in economic development terms, people in this age group are seen as the prime labor force, and the fact that there is a decline in the county means that they're going somewhere else to find work. And usually this is the age that most families or most individuals purchase their first home. So we see that the need to, as I had mentioned in the examples previously, people cannot afford to buy homes in Westchester County without assistance. The next couple of slides are focused on county residents that have housing, but are facing housing stability. Housing stability has no standard definition per se, but it covers a number of challenges faced by homeowners and renters, such as trouble paying their rent or their mortgage, living in overcrowded conditions, and cost-burdened households. The housing needs assessment identified that 22% of all units in Westchester County, which is 75,271 units, have one or more problems related to housing instability. So these would be, and the slides that I will show next will show the data for substandard housing, overcrowded living conditions, and or cost-burdened households. I should say severely cost-burdened households. So this first slide is best explained as housing units that lack complete plumbing or kitchen facilities. Throughout the county, there are 2,556 substandard units. 41% of these units are located in the cities in the southern part of the county, Yonkers, Mount Vernon, and New Rochelle. And the Village of Mamaroneck, again, looking at the CHAS data, which is the Comprehensive Housing Analysis Study from 2011 to 2015, it shows that there are 15 substandard household units. For severely overcrowded households, which means that there are more than 1.5 persons per room in a unit, and I don't mean bedrooms, I just mean, you know, units, rooms in general. We see that there are 4,523 households living in severely overcrowded conditions, and the majority, again, are in the cities in the southern part of the county. Mamaroneck Town reports about 45 units of severely overcrowded living conditions. The Village of Larchmont, 10 units, and the Village of Mamaroneck, 50 units. And when we talk about cost burden households, as I had mentioned in the beginning of my presentation, housing costs should not be more than 30% of your gross household, monthly household expenses, income. Cost burden households spend between more than 30% up to 50% of their household income on housing. Severely cost burden households spend 50% or more of their household income each month on housing. And we see that throughout Westchester, there are 72,327 households that are severely cost burdened. Again, a good chunk of them, 42%, are again located in Yonkers, Mount Vernon, and New Rochelle. In Mamaroneck, in the town of Mamaroneck, you have 625 households that are severely cost burdened. In the Village of Larchmont, 235 households, and the Village of Mamaroneck, 1,700 households. As the previous slides demonstrate, the housing needs assessment showed that there are 75,271 housing units in the county that have one or more problems related to substandard housing, overcrowded living conditions, or households that are severely cost burdened. However, the total gross need for affordable housing based on the study is 82,451. This includes not just the existing housing stock that's suffering, but also the need to build new affordable housing. And that estimated demand for new construction becomes 11,703 units. When Pattern for Progress and the Department of Planning were looking at these numbers, they took into consideration the fact that, again, we have over 4,000 households that are severely overcrowded, which means that they would need new housing units. At the time of the study, we had about 846 homeless families in shelters. And at the time of the study, we also had 6,334 registrants who had registered for the Home Seeker program. The Home Seeker program became a reality in response to the housing lawsuit, or the affordable housing lawsuit that the county experienced in the late 2000s. In response to the lawsuit, the county had to create a program, in addition to building the 750 affordable housing units in 31 municipalities that had not really increased their affordable housing stock. They also had to build a program that would assist individuals and families who were actively looking for affordable housing opportunities to be able to obtain the information on rental or sales or units that were for sale, to receive the applications in order to apply, to receive dates of open house or any type of information session. And at the time of the study, there are over 15,000 people who had registered for Home Seeker. 6,334 of them were people who were living in surrounding counties or in Connecticut. So that to us represented the regional demand. People are actively looking to live in Westchester County, but they need to look at affordable housing opportunities in order to be able to live here. So when you add up those three different components, we see the estimated demand for new construction. Again, this is from 2019, based off data between 2000 to 2017, the demand for new construction and affordable housing is more than likely more now, and it's not even a year since this study was released. With that, I wanted to just show you the housing needs assessment. It is available for the public to review and to read. I have the link listed on the slide. I can also put it in the chat box. It had been maybe over 10 years that Westchester County had developed some sort of housing needs study. The two prior studies that were done in the early 2000s looked at just affordable housing, and it was followed with some sort of allocation plan, which is what each municipality, based on a formula, they were supposed to build in order to address the need in their own communities. What this study did was, this study did not have an allocation plan per se, but rather it looked at the housing needs throughout the county and also provided 7 pages or 8 pages of housing data for each municipality. And the idea behind that was to make sure that municipalities understood, first of all, with new data, the need of affordable housing, the number of homeless people in their community, the number of households that are severely cost burdened or living in overcrowded housing conditions, in order to begin some sort of plan, a plan of action for each community. Do community residents need foreclosure prevention or assistance so that their homes do not fall into foreclosure? Or do they need assistance with their rent because there's so many people living in cost burden units? So when the study was released in November of last year, in early January, the county executive began to meet with municipalities on a regional basis. So each municipality is divided into, the 45 municipalities are divided into 5 regions, and the county executive had regional meetings to discuss in general the housing needs assessment, its main findings, how many affordable housing units had been built in that particular region. And the hope was for later on in the spring to be able to meet with each municipality, giving them time to study and digest all the information from the study, and to help them through technical assistance begin a housing plan for each municipality. Unfortunately, COVID hit, and while we have had to stop our dialogue that we want to have, we are starting to do that in September. Actually, our Commissioner of Planning, Norma Drummond, has begun to meet with the municipalities, and we hope to be able to not only continue this dialogue, but also move forward with the initiatives that we had identified and created for 2020. And I hope to be able to share that when we have our panel discussion. So that's really all I have for now, but I look forward to hearing from my colleagues next. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Blanca. You can, if you don't mind, just stop sharing your screen whenever you can. We'll definitely distribute your contact information as you need. But wow, thank you for that amazing overview of the current state of need in our area. And it's just overwhelmingly clear that access to housing and the way we use our land has a huge effect on equity in this community. So Tiffany, we're gonna turn to you now. Your specialty is really getting as many people involved in land use issues as possible in a proactive way. So we would love to hear from you about, generally what you do, but also the crucial yet somewhat elusive, at least to many of us, and certainly to me before we had our initial conversation, comprehensive plans and how important they are in setting the stage to counter NIMBY-ism ahead of time. So I'll throw it over to you now. Thanks.
Thank you. No, thanks for having me. Thank you for inviting me to participate in this. For those of you who I don't know on this call right now, my name is Tiffany Zezula. I'm the Deputy Director of the Land Use Law Center, which was created in 1995. We serve a dual mission. We identify respected local leaders in the region, and we provide them with training and technical assistance that we hope they can use to make sound land use decisions. And our other mission is we are, of course, part of a law school. So we are training young attorneys to understand this system, understand the tools and techniques that are out there to make better decisions for our communities. So I love what I do. I've been doing it for quite a few years now, and there is about, I would say, over 3,500 local leaders, both elected officials and citizens. I would just say land use decision makers that have graduated from our training programs, and it's an awesome field to be in. So what I am going to do is just talk a little bit about, yes, comprehensive plans for sure. I want to give a crash course because I think it's necessary for everyone to understand a little bit of local government in order to get to understanding the comprehensive plan, and then talk about our engagement in the system and in land use in specific. So it is important to recognize before I move forward to discuss, right, that the past and sometimes even our present actions by the local governments in policies and in regulations have played a role, quite frankly, in creating and perpetuating discriminatory and exclusionary practices, right? So zoning, which many of us know is intended traditionally to separate incompatible land uses, right? But it's also been used, unfortunately, to exclude certain populations from our community, maybe in single family neighborhoods, or exclude multifamily rental housing. But land use can also be used for good and create very vibrant communities that we all hope to see. So I do find that land use planning, zoning, whatever you want to call it, it is one of the most dynamic fields that encompasses so much of how our community grows and how much it is preserved. And so it's funny, you know, I always say that I go to cocktail parties and people ask me what I do, and I say land use, and people walk away from me very slowly and kindly. But this is such an amazing field, okay? And so we're going to talk about why it's so amazing to be a part of this and how, of course, affordable housing fits into this. So many people aren't sure how or who has all this authority in making decisions about how our community grows and what it looks like. So again, I'm giving you this crash course, and this is usually, you know, a semester in law school about land use. I'm going to summarize this in 2 slides, but local land use board decisions that our villages, our towns, our cities are making, they are, the people at this board level down below, they are the primary regulatory influence on the land. Local governments, the decisions that they make create essentially the blueprint for future development and for conservation in our community. And if we align each of the blueprints of every municipality in Westchester County, you begin to see essentially what the region, the future development of our region would look like. And so how does this local board members, right, get that authority? The New York State Constitution authorizes the state legislature to adopt laws to protect the public's health, safety, and welfare. And in the wisdom of the state legislature, they delegated significant authority to regulate land use to the local level, which is amazing because, of course, at the local level, we know our communities so well. We know how they operate. We know what's important to our citizens. And so in New York, there are nearly 1,600 villages, towns, and cities right across our state that have been authorized to adopt zoning and to plan and to create environmental regulations, to create planning and zoning and environmental committees that assist us in working out this land use field. And they can adopt things like comprehensive plans that I'm going to talk about, and they can approve subdivisions and site plans and issue special use permits and award variances, all these things which I'm not going to get into tonight because that could be another whole hour or 2 discussion, but they have very broad authority and frankly, they can be very creative in what they do to accomplish our goals as a community. And there's this whole host which is, I'm going to keep showing the slide here, but there's a whole host of volunteers and elected people that make up our land use system. They have a role and they have a responsibility in either creating laws, administering those laws, or they are quasi-judicial in nature, that they hear appeals when things don't go maybe a homeowner's way. So this is a whole group of people that we see in our community that might be, you know, on a Thursday night at 7 p.m. If you want to get involved, you could go to town hall, maybe not right now, or you can go onto Zoom and check out your town hall, but they're making decisions on a weekly basis regarding what property owners are doing, where things are being built, and potentially where things are even being preserved. Okay, so again, tons of local jurisdictions in New York, and all of them are planning for themselves, right? They're thinking about their own community, what their housing needs might be, how they want to grow in the future. This can be frustrating for developers because as developers come in, every community is different in the way they express their zoning, in the way that the chapters are phrased within a comprehensive plan. And so, you know, again, I just want to stress that every municipality, and quite frankly, there are plenty of people sometimes that don't even realize which municipality they live in, because we have things like the village of Mamaroneck, the town of Mamaroneck, right? We have, I can name quite a few, but so sometimes, again, like town of Ossining, village of Ossining, we have no idea where we even live or how then to get involved then in the discussions that affect us again, how we operate within our community. All right, so one of the things though that many of you are probably aware of on this call is that one of the most significant land use powers that are given to our local government is this responsibility to undertake comprehensive planning and their ability to zone and adopt zoning. Okay, so to serve the public interest, local governments should ensure that plans and proposed regulations are going to serve and benefit all the residents of our community in ways that reduce or eliminate inequity. Okay, so again, a really important moment here. We're looking at plans, we're looking at regulations, our local governments are responsible for these. And when we are looking at that, we need to understand there is a whole group of people and residents in our community that we are trying to serve in these actions that we take as local municipalities. So what is a comprehensive plan? And I want to just, I'm going to stress this for a little bit and talk more about a comprehensive plan, but I think this truly to me, even beyond zoning, is probably the most important tool in our toolbox as a local government, because it ensures fairness and equity. It begins to discuss our goals in housing, in services, in health, in safety, in the livelihood of the needs of, again, all citizens and all groups of people. And so it is a written document. You can actually visit your website of your municipality and go online, and hopefully it's easy to find. I did look before joining this evening, and there are pages about your comprehensive plan for the town of Mamaroneck, village of Mamaroneck, and even village of Larchmont. But it is a written document that is adopted by your local legislative board, and it contains goals and objectives and strategies for the future development and conservation of your community. Now, here's what's awesome, and this is the way I look at it, is this is your community's New Year's resolution. Okay, so this is why we want to get involved in it, right? It has huge goals, and quite frankly, we may not accomplish every single goal within our comprehensive plan. Just like I don't accomplish my goal when I set it for my New Year's resolution. But in a comprehensive plan, you have those goals and you also have strategies, these action items that we're going to try to sort of check the box as we move along in our municipality to accomplish that goal. So each week, yes, I'm going to try in my own, right, in my own world of my New Year's resolution, I try to take certain actions and steps to achieve that goal. Will I achieve it? Possibly not, but I have some strategies that are going to get me there. And that's the same thing of how our comprehensive plan works for our municipalities. And what's amazing about a comprehensive plan and why it's so important is that legally, all land use regulations, right, including zoning, must conform to a municipality's comprehensive plan. So that plan provides significant legal protection for regulations when they're adopted. It shows, it's proving that you are advancing a legitimate public interest. So people who are looking at new regulations, looking at new zoning, need to make sure, and board members, quite frankly, need to make sure that this is all in accordance with a community's comprehensive plan. So we're going to get back to that in 1 second. So usually people say, well, that's this, okay, your job's sounding a little bit better, and this is getting a little bit more exciting. But then we look, we take everyone's going to go home now, and you look for the comprehensive plan, you realize, oh my gosh, this was written potentially 20, 30, possibly even 40 years ago. And a lot has changed from the past 40 years, heck, in the past 6 months, right? Okay, so when do we adopt new comprehensive plans? When do we need to look at adopting new plans? Well, it could be that our board members, our local board members, start to see that there's a request for new zoning amendments, meaning, you know what, we can't fit that type of mixed use downtown vision that we want to see because it's not zoned to do that, right? Because we're trying to create uses in these districts that we want to see. We might have noticed that there's a social community need or change. We might have obviously local or national shifts, or we realize that there is a need in the community that is not currently provided for. So you read your comprehensive plan and you realize, oh wait, we're not talking about X, Y, and Z that is important to us as a community. We need to put that within our plan. Okay, so that's when you're thinking about new plans. Now, here's the good news for everybody, or I think for most of you on the call, is that your communities are in the process right now of revisiting their comprehensive plans and of updating their comprehensive plans. And so it is time for everyone to start to think about how they're going to get involved in this conversation. I'm going to talk about public engagement in a minute, but there is tons of public engagement that should be happening around the development of these plans. I think the Village of Mamaroneck is winding down their process. The town of Mamaroneck, I think, is beginning this process of getting community conversation involved regarding, again, regarding the comprehensive plan. So make sure you're getting, becoming aware and visiting your websites of your local municipality to see, what's coming and how you can get involved in that dialogue. And here's what's going to be within that comprehensive plan, and this is why it's exciting, right? There is a range of topics that we cover within comprehensive plans. So it's topics like housing, it's topics like our town centers and commercial development, the environment, infrastructure, transportation, where communities look to the comprehensive plan to decide how they're going to invest in transportation improvements and public facilities. Maybe in the comprehensive plan, there's a beginning of recommendation towards new zoning regulations. We can begin to protect more ecologically sensitive areas in our community. Or we as a community say we want to be more environmentally sustainable. Whatever that goal is, that's what gets put within this comprehensive plan. And of course, most important to everyone on this call is that comprehensive plans discuss the area of housing, the range of housing types, the diversity of housing we want to see in our community. What is our housing need? And so it's you look back at what the study that Pattern for Progress has done and Westchester County has done that Blanca just went through. It's looking at that for our municipality, those needs, and thinking to ourselves, well, now what are our goals and how are we going to essentially, right, plan and develop to meet what Blanca said is possibly a missing group of housing stock or housing type within our community that we need. So it's a huge compliment to what that housing needs study has just done, is now updating these comprehensive plans accordingly. Another exciting thing, again, probably just to me, but that's okay, is that comprehensive plans have changed. They used to be, fairly boring. And so you would see these comprehensive plans and they were this big and they'd sit on the shelf, and quite frankly, I'm not sure how many people actually opened up the comprehensive plan because they were so thick with so much data and information. And what was also crazy about the comprehensive plans, and again, people are still doing it this way, which is okay, it's that everything was siloed. Every single topic was siloed into different chapters, and they were single issue based topics, such as land use, housing, transportation. And what we know is that now new comprehensive plans, and we're starting to see an emergence of these new plans, have adopted a multidisciplinary approach, which recognizes the interwoven complexity of all these topics, right? And quite frankly, of the world we live in. So the new plans begin to highlight the linkages between these areas, and we begin to see how our built environment, right, talks about now transportation and housing and services and economic development all together, and not so isolated in the conversation in our comprehensive plans. And furthermore, the new comprehensive plans are also considering sustainability. And what I mean by sustainability is this incorporation of the three E's. I like to call it, here it's 2 E's and an S, but that's okay. Environmental, economic development, or, the economy, and of course, equity, that social component. And this equity lens is essential to frame and consider during the shaping of our comprehensive plan and of this document. An equity lens will challenge those planning practices and actions that disproportionately impact or have stymied the progress of certain segments of our population. So we have to keep that in mind as we develop our comprehensive plans. So we have begun to now see comprehensive plans that have chapters, right? And yes, on housing, they've always had, but now it's chapters that are looking at a diversity of housing, goals for alternative types of housing for those that are currently underserved. We're encouraging housing to be linked to transportation, to services, right? We're looking holistically at the whole thing, where we encourage even housing of various economic values to be interspersed throughout our community instead of possibly concentrated or clustered. So we're looking at the full vision of how housing fits into the community. And now you're saying to me, okay, well, that sounds quite easy. Like, why aren't we just doing that, Tiffany, right? Why? Look, these look good. These goals look good. We can provide a range of housing types. We can locate a range of housing types within our community. Those are good goals to have. But we have to have community support and community participation to get those goals into our comprehensive plan, right? Which brings me to one of the most important things I always talk about, and it is public participation in comprehensive planning. Good plans are the ones that involve the community, the ones that involve residents' participation, and not just the same people who I love who come out at 7 p.m., right? Those are well done. It's, quite frankly, it's not even me who comes out every 7 p.m. every night in my own municipality. But it's all the voices, and we have to find a way to find those voices to enhance that comprehensive plan, to enhance this conversation of what we're all striving for in our community. And it's also then therefore going to be based on the values of our citizens and the goals of our residents. So this is a time of enormous opportunity and potential. The advances that we have seen and made since the update of many of our comprehensive plans have improved our lives across a whole host of economic, social, and health indicators. But there's also much that remains to be done. We do not want to, during this time, ignore the challenges of inequity, of poverty, of even, quite frankly, climate change. Whatever that it is that's important to you, that is what we have to plan for in our future. So we have to embrace this opportunity ahead of us. We are going to hopefully have everyone begin to participate in the conversation and talk to those that, quite frankly, may not always see eye to eye with us. So this slide I use in pretty much every speaking engagement that I have. It was a photo taken, and this, quite frankly, is what land use is all about. I mean, unfortunately, land use has become a very, people have a very visceral response to it. People find, I think, sometimes talking about land use, talking about housing as a competition where someone's going to win and someone's going to lose. And I have mentioned already in a comprehensive plan how many topics it's involved, right? That's involved. We have a lot of interests. We have a lot of values that have to be weighed and considered and discussed, right? And so we have, unfortunately, the not in my backyard, and we've got people who are angry and they make signs, right? And that's my funny, but there is stuff that is going on that has to be discussed now, proactively, not reactionary to what development might come or what a decision is that a community is making at the time, but instead use this time, again, proactively to decide what it is we want, what it is we value, and then how to put that within that planning document so that therefore the zoning that falls from it, the regulations that fall from it must be in accordance with those values that we hold so dear. And so we want to begin to create an atmosphere that is, yes, in my backyard, we want these things. And my whole world of work is not just land use, but it's about community engagement and its importance in helping us implement and build public support for land use and for these policies. So we don't just want to come out at that regular meeting upset and angry like the woman on the right here where everyone's listening and yet I'm not sure if they are fully listening and she's just upset. And again, she's reacting to something versus, and by the way, oh, I'm even wearing the same shirt in my photo, my gosh, but where we are sitting together, and we're talking about these issues and we are involving a diverse group of stakeholders for meaningful public participation. And that's what's going to create better neighborhoods and a better community. So get engaged, right? Play an active role in that decision making and become active in involving those issues and identifying the solutions for our communities. And so on that note, I'm going to leave it, and then we can also, I can certainly take questions, but I can't speak more highly of our comprehensive planning process. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tiffany. That was wonderful and a lot of valuable information in there to take in about how we can start to actually engage on some of this as community members. And maybe not to answer now, but saving to the end, a question that comes to my mind immediately is, okay, so really practically speaking, can we break down like how do we actually get involved in building the comprehensive plan? So maybe we can save that one for the Q&A. But for now, I would love to turn to you, Rich. We're going to get into some of the practicalities of development in this area from your perspective as a nonprofit developer, and hopefully you can touch on some of the key, challenges and opportunities you see in your experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Tiffany, I would love to talk comprehensive planning at a dinner party anytime. I don't know what's boring about that. I just wanted to say, I really do not like following Blanca and Tiffany. Typically, Westchester is really blessed with both of their talents and efforts, and we have a lot of great leaders in this space. And I also just want to thank CURE for having us. As Gabby just said, Westhab is a little bit here as a case study. So Tiffany and Blanca do incredible work. Somehow we're still getting tomatoes thrown at us though. So, how is that the case and what's that all about? Before I pull up my slides, I know 3 PowerPoints in a row is tough. I'll try to fly through those so we have as much time to be conversational as possible. But just to tie into CURE's, core mission, I couldn't think of a more central social justice issue than housing. What zip code you live in has far too much to say about your life opportunities in this country and in this world. It's the school district you send your kids. We have families that are making a decision about diapers or food or rent. And it's really a tragic, and urgent social justice issue. So it's sometimes hard for the numbers to jump off the page when Blanca shows, the rent gap that exists. That's money that folks do not have at the end of the month, to make it. And that often ends up with folks showing up in homeless shelters, showing up in, in other places. There is not a community in America right now where minimum wage can afford a fair market 2-bedroom rental unit, let alone metropolitan New York. So if that's true in Idaho, I don't want to pick on Idaho, anywhere, Montana, where can I pick on? Obviously, we have folks in our community who we pay a wage to that cannot afford housing in our community. So we go out to dinner, we need the plates to be bussed, we need folks to come and clean homes and do these are jobs that are important to the livelihood of our community, yet we do not have a housing stock that reflects, that provides for those people. So these inequities are urgent. And just one more thing, then I'll do the PowerPoint. I'll go very fast, I promise. There's a long history to this. So we're talking today about the inequities that exist in Westchester, that exist right in our backyard today. But there is a long history of redlining. There's a long history of denying communities of color mortgages and opportunities to build wealth for their families. So we have generations of folks that have left the city to raise families in Westchester. The next generation that wants to do that same upward mobility, the American dream, often a more brown and diverse population, there is not the housing stock to absorb those people. So there was a generation that was, quote unquote, allowed to achieve the American dream. And there's a generation that is being denied that same opportunity. And it'd be impossible to talk about housing and not talk about race equity and systemic exclusion and systemic denial of resources. With that, I will share my screen. And I will try to get as quickly as I can to the conversational part of the evening, which I think is the best part. Let's see if I can go full screen. How am I doing? You guys see what I'm seeing? Very quickly, Westhab is the largest nonprofit developer of affordable housing in Westchester. We're also the largest provider of housing and services to the homeless population. We've been around about 40 years. If you're already surprised that Westchester has a homeless population, you shouldn't be. Because our cost of living is so high, it's also more likely that folks stumble upon tough times in our community and can't keep up, as we've talked about with that rental gap today. So those things are more aligned than they are in contrast. Our mission is building communities, changing lives. For us, building communities is the bricks and mortar of affordable housing development, and the changing lives is all of the support and services that enhance those buildings and the larger community. So we have folks that call Westhab home. We are their landlord. We operate shelters, permanent affordable housing, supportive housing, special needs housing for various populations. And then we also have service programs that extend much farther than our housing stock, job training programs, after-school programs for youth, et cetera. I'm going to give you a quick example of the kind of things that we've built in Westchester. Most of it has been with close support with our county, Blanca. So, we appreciate that and hope that continues, of course. Here's a building that we built in Yonkers some time ago, but this is the reason I'm including this one. Let me try to move where my face is so I can see what I'm looking at. It's just like a standard high quality, new construction, 29 units, real livable community, real thoughtful green space, on-site parking, and it's just income restricted affordable housing. So folks can live here if they earn a household income of 60% or less than our median income. Saw some of those numbers earlier, and live in high quality housing. This one is in Yonkers. Here's a building that we built in Greenburgh. And I highlight this because Greenburgh is a very diverse community. This is right near the county center. This is next to a big Staples. If affordable housing doesn't fit on this site, I don't know where it does fit. And we had an enormous battle on our hands, much more than we expected, that raged into carryover meeting after carryover meeting and screaming matches. Our building got smaller as a result of that process. The financing almost went underwater as a result of that process. And I'm happy to say, we've been the most attractive, well-run building in the neighborhood since our inception. I hope that's true. We used to run a homeless men's shelter on this site. And when we collectively in Westchester were winning the war against homelessness, no longer needed that program, we purchased the parcel, bulldozed this old, kind of crumbling building and built brand new housing. We looked at that as such a beautiful, transformation. Our neighbors did not necessarily agree. Within this housing is also some housing for formerly homeless veterans. And if there's a population we should serve, I think that's got to be pretty high on the list. This is senior housing that we built in New Rochelle a little more recently. This was in partnership with a local Baptist church. So I've included this one just to give a sense of some of the partnerships, that exist around housing. There are really creative housing programs where you can build housing over retail, housing over faith spaces, obviously mixed use housing in terms of market rate blended with affordable. Really the sky is the limit in terms of creativity that can be allowed, provided that the comprehensive plan allows for it. So we'll include that. And this has been operating really well. We have a great partnership with our friends at Shiloh Baptist Church. This is some young adult housing we built very recently. Actually, we have a partner here in Children's Village that provides services to young people who are aged out of foster care. This is transitional. So in one of these two buildings houses 8 young men. In the other building, it houses 8 young women. The staff wish the buildings were much farther apart, but they are what they are. And there's a 24/7, wraparound service program here, helping these young people engage with college, continue in their education, enter the workforce successfully, and then hopefully move out to permanent housing, often as roommates with one another. It was our most recently open building. Obviously, I had to include our nicest pictures, so this one's included. This is a senior housing building. Actually, this building runs just like the Shiloh building in terms of the rent structure, and I didn't mention it before. The maximum income in our senior buildings, the way that this was financed through HUD, is 50% of median income, not 60. But one difference is there's no minimum, and all of our tenants pay 30% of their income in rent. And we have a subsidy program to make up the difference. So we have fixed income seniors that might be on disability, that might be on Medicaid, or very small retirement, funds. They pay 30% of whatever their income is in rent. That is very often $200 or $300 to live in a brand new 1-bedroom apartment that looks like this. So we find various creative subsidy ways to go much deeper than that 60%. So 60% might qualify, and even 80% sometimes, as affordable housing. Well, you saw how high the median income is in Westchester. That is not meeting the need of our lower and moderate income workforce. That is not meeting the need of our seniors or our young adults. So Westhab seeks to find even more creative ways to finance projects and to build housing that looks beautiful like this and is affordable. Before, Gabby, you had in the chat about environmental concerns, and I have a little more on that coming up as well. But one thing to mention, this was a brownfield site. So this was a contaminated site. And one thing that is great about affordable housing, I don't always feel this way because I used to have a lot more hair, is it is so regulated a space. But the good part about that is New York State and the county would never finance us if we didn't do the work properly to remediate the site, to deal with environmental concerns, the regulation is actually a good thing because you can be certain that that product is going to be built in a sustainable way, in a very regulated way. So this was a brownfield site that went through a full remediation, and actually this building earned LEED Gold status. We were aiming for LEED Silver and we achieved LEED Gold. So to go from brownfield to a LEED Gold in environmental sustainability is pretty incredible and shows how affordable housing actually promotes environmental considerations. I had to include Mamaroneck. So some folks on the call tonight might be aware of an organization called the Washingtonville Housing Alliance. Washingtonville Housing Alliance has been around for 40 years, is homegrown in the village of Mamaroneck. We own and manage 40 units of affordable housing in Mamaroneck. We helped also create Mamaroneck Senior Towers over on Halstead near the train station. A number of years ago, Washingtonville Housing Alliance formed a partnership with Westhab. They are now an affiliate and part of Westhab, so we could bring some of our expertise and support to enhance their portfolio. And through the Washingtonville Housing Alliance, we are very eager to create new quality affordable housing in the village, and that's something we are constantly working on. And I can talk more about some of the challenges involved, but this really brings the issue home. Some of you might drive by this building. All of our 40 units of housing are in, the flats in the Washingtonville community. And that's certainly so much more is needed. We have folks that pour into our office in Mamaroneck every day looking for housing, and unfortunately they face those those lengthy waiting lists that we talked about earlier. So just to bring this to Mamaroneck a little bit. I won't get into it tonight because tonight's about housing. I had to include one side just on the changing lives side of Westhab so you get a sense of us. As I said, it's not just bricks and mortar. We provide all kinds of wraparound services to our tenants. You saw earlier that includes seniors, veterans, young adults. We serve the disabled in our portfolio. We also run full service youth and family programs for our residents and for the larger community, as well as job training and job placement programs. So that's just a little more about some of the wraparound services that Westhab offers. So much of this was covered by my colleagues, so I won't go into it too much, but basically I broke the obstacles and solutions down into two halves. So this is the second to last slide, so we're getting there. This is like the hearts and minds slide. So we need to build a real support community. We need to build that YIMBY community. Like YIMBY is not even a known term, but NIMBY is, that's not great, So when someone wants to build something or, opposes something being built, they are sure to show up to that meeting. They are sure to go around town and strum up fear and strum up, anxiety about something new and something is changing and we don't want this and what is this? I've never had a knock on my door about someone that, hey, come out because we're really excited about welcoming new families into our community. You should come to this 8 p.m. optional meeting. I never get that knock on the door. So we really need to debunk myths about what affordable housing is. As you saw tonight, new affordable housing is environmentally friendly, is built super green. We are regulated in ways that we build to the highest standards. So a private actor might cut corners. That is not done in affordable housing development. And we work super hard to be the nicest building on the block. Often, if you had a problem with residents in your neighborhood, the best you could find online is, Main Street LLC. But our buildings are owned and managed by Westhab. You can call us. We are responsive. We are proud to put our logo on our buildings. So you have a accountable neighbor that wants to be part of the community. So, there's so much that needs to be done to erode stigma and dispel myths. Before we talked about, the AMI levels. 60% of Westchester's area median income is often people earning $70,000 a year. People freak out that affordable housing is going to be developed. If they really realized that they were trying to prevent people earning $70,000 from living in their precious community, I think they might feel differently. Now, that's not to say we shouldn't also be serving people at 30% of median income and below. So it's all about balance. It's all about blending things in a thoughtful and a careful way. I talked about supportive housing before, ways to get way below the 60% with wraparound services. So sometimes folks feel concerned, oh, there's going to be special needs tenants here. The best thing about supportive housing is that staffing is included. And I'd much rather build buildings that are really well staffed, that have evening, security and support for our tenants. So really, we find supportive housing to be some of the best run part of our portfolio. I talked about the tie-in with workforce. We need to build a housing stock that supports our local workforce. How many of our businesses, on Mamaroneck Avenue and right in the downtown, are closed or shuttered? Where do the people that work in those businesses live? So affordable housing is a huge component of economic development, and that's something that also needs a lot more attention. Obviously, there are so many community benefits to affordable housing. I said I would be short, but I'm a nonprofit executive director. I was lying. I have one more slide. And then really the structural obstacles. I could never talk about this stuff better than Tiffany, so I won't, but this stuff matters and it's local, and we talk about zoning so much. Big decisions are happening in local zoning boards. So, it's great. We have a county executive that embraces a lot of what's here. We have, there are great leaders in the world, but there's not one Westchester. There are 45 different local municipalities making decisions, and the way you build in the village of Mamaroneck is different than how you build in Greenburgh. It's different. There is, in every place, there's no one way to do this. I think sometimes when folks are looking to build affordable housing, people get scared about density, and they say, look, I'm not against affordable housing. I just don't want my community to be overbuilt. Well, obviously, multifamily housing is going to be more affordable than single family homes. And not all of our neighbors can afford $1 million homes and the property taxes that come along with that. And so much of Westchester County, that is the entire housing stock. When you go north of 287, that is mostly what you are getting. So we need density. We need to like embrace that. We need to dispel that. Our downtowns need density. No one is trying to build skyscrapers in backcountry. That would not work for our tenants. There's no comprehensive plan that encourages 40-story buildings in backcountry Chappaqua in places where you need to own a car. We try to build more dense housing in transit-oriented places that facilitate and support our local downtowns, that work for the workforce that our communities need. So density is important. Another important part of local zoning consideration, and Tiffany, I don't know if you specifically mentioned it by name, there's no affordable developer that will not talk about parking. We are forced to build the parking that is in the code, even though lower income tenants very, seldomly own cars. We try always to build near train stations, near bus stations, yet we are financing empty, rarely used parking lots. And so, when affordable developments are proposed, they often need variances to increase density and to decrease parking. And that scares a lot of people, but there's a real rationale in terms of how those considerations help us create a financeable deal and help us create really high quality housing with kind of the amenities and the support that you saw earlier. So I won't go into every detail. Tiffany is the expert. And I think probably before we go to sleep, we should discuss. So let me get out of this. You can go to westhab.org, and Gabby, I'm sure you're going to share our contacts and that kind of thing. But let me take off the screen share here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you also just for bringing it back home at the start of your presentation about why we're really here and why this really matters. Thank you so much. So yeah, I think, as you said, let's open this up to the discussion. I saw we had some questions in the chat. I think, Nicole, you were monitoring those. Do you have some ready to?
Yeah, I feel like Richard answered your question, Gabby, pretty much with the environmental piece, and the buildings are beautiful. I've seen a lot of them in person. Yes, Tiffany?
Add to the environmental conversation real quick, because what's fascinating to me is what I'm starting to see and watch is that we have very active citizens who are in, conservation, quote, committees or groups or sustainability groups. And then we have active citizens that are in housing committees and groups. And just recently in some training programs I've been in, I've watched one of my housing advocate groups say, well, shouldn't we be partnering with our conservation advisory group or a sustainability group in this conversation and have a larger dialogue? Because if we can develop in the appropriate places, which Rich was referring to, if we can go where the infrastructure is, if we can go where the transit is and create that density and scale that we're looking for housing, then we can preserve the areas that are also important to us as an environmental committee, right? And so that conversation of those two groups coming together, I thought was just fascinating. We'll see what they do more in the future, but I think there is a natural link. It's just like the comprehensive plan, all of this stuff intersects. And so why wouldn't we, right, have those conversations together or work together as committees in that? So.
Mm-hmm.
Do you mind if I jump in one more time here too? I'm sorry. So I just want to bring this very local to Mamaroneck, and I won't belabor the point, but I know a lot of the people joining here are from the greater Mamaroneck area. Mamaroneck just had a moratorium on multifamily development for a period of time. And what that meant was they called a pause. They called a timeout and said, we feel like there's too much development, or that we have not created the planning and thought behind what's going on. We want to call a timeout and forbid all multifamily development of 3 units or more while we create a comprehensive plan. Well, they didn't prevent single family homes. They prevented multifamily, which is inherently, gonna hinder affordability. It's just true, right? So on behalf of the Washingtonville Housing Alliance, we oppose going into a moratorium. There are other ways to do things. There are other ways to keep the gates open while regulating. There was already a planning board in place. There's already a zoning board in place. When the moratorium was finally lifted. It was first extended a couple times and then finally lifted. There, it was lifted in a way that was not harmful to affordable housing. There actually were some considerations that were incorporated, but there was a new law included that nothing could be built of any kind within 50 feet of any waterway. And this was for environmental concerns, or that was at least the justification for adding this. If you live in Mamaroneck, between the Mamaroneck River and the Sheldrake River, our entire downtown is non-conforming to that standard. So rather than create, hey, you can build there if you do it in this very important way that mitigates environmental concerns, et cetera. As I said, affordable housing is already extremely regulated. There's already the need locally to, to create a whole stormwater plan, and there's already bodies and mechanisms in Mamaroneck in place. By doing the 50-foot setback, which sounds good for the environmental reasons, there were adequate environmental protections already in place, and actually it is hindering all, affordable development, basically dense development in the downtown. So sometimes, what seems like an environmental measure in the detail is actually preventing, more dense development, preventing affordable development. And there are sometimes a little bit more detailed ways to allow for both things to continue.
And Richard, there was a tremendous amount of development after that moratorium lifted. I mean, there are some beautiful buildings that just sprung up in the last year or a little more. And I'm assuming none of that is affordable.
Well, so yeah, the bulk of that was actually approved pre-moratorium. So there, I know that there are some local, how do we say, polarizing developments that have gone on in Mamaroneck. Okay. And the bulk of that was approved pre-moratorium.
Okay.
What's going to happen next is unclear. I can just say the Washingtonville Housing Alliance can't wait to build new quality affordable housing in Mamaroneck, but finding a site to make that work is very challenging.
Okay.
I'll get off my soapbox.
No, it's the soapbox we need. And I want to say too, before I get to questions, I know immediately people start thinking, well, our schools are pretty crowded and they're going to get more, overcrowded. But we've had solutions on the table around that as well. And I think, not just because we're CURE, the Coalition, for Understanding Racism, but I think a lot of the pushback on either affordable housing, maybe using a Princeton type plan in the school system. This is very much about, we want a diverse community, but we want to keep segregated. I mean, I think, to put it plainly, that's kind of the writing on the wall. And I don't, that just is how it rolls out. Correct me if I'm wrong.
One thing that jumped out to me tonight in Blanca's presentation was that 30 to 44 demographic. So I think often too, people look at today's reality and say, oh, we couldn't fit more students. By the time a development is proposed and goes through the zoning process and built and occupied, that's going to be 5 years from now.
Right.
And the population trend in Westchester is that we're turning into an affluent white retirement community. And that is where Westchester is going if it doesn't change course. So it doesn't always feel that way today. Sorry to say that's so pointed. But
no,
if if the 30 to 44 demographic is moving to Stamford, Connecticut, and is moving to Long Island, they're investing their lives in those communities. They're paying taxes in those communities. And that's the exact demographic that Westchester historically welcomed. We all come here when our 2-bedroom on the Upper West Side is feeling too small to raise a family. And we need to pave the way for the next generation of people to do that. Sorry, Blanca.
Did you have something to say, Blanca?
No, I mean, you're absolutely right. It's a little scary knowing that the diversity of our county as well is kind of staying in the cities, right? Or in the southern part of the county, as opposed to diversifying throughout the county. And the fact that our prime labor force is moving out because they can't find housing they can afford. There are jobs other places. There is housing being built in other locations. If you look at the housing permits being issued in the city or in counties in New Jersey, they are far more than the entire region of the Hudson Valley. So, housing, jobs follow where the housing is. And that is one of the initiatives that we are trying to have with, actually with the PACE Land Use Law Center, in terms of talking to employers about employee-assisted housing. How can we assist people who are maybe being hired at a company in Westchester County to be able to find housing they can afford? So do we provide some incentive for purchasing a home, or for stabilizing their household as they move in here and as they get settled into their jobs? So that is one of the initiatives that we really want to follow through with.
I don't want to skip some of these questions. A woman named Clorinda wrote in, and I asked her to be specific about what she was saying, but I don't know that she wrote back. So wait, did she? Let's see. No, so she asked how she could protect herself from discrimination and challenges with housing in Larchmont. And I asked her if this discrimination was race-based, disability-based, financial, I'm not sure what. So I don't think I've gotten an answer, but
You should call Blanca.
Okay, so
Actually, you can call the Human Rights Commission.
Yes.
Okay, the Human Rights Commission, Westchester County.
Yes, I will be more than happy to type that in the chat box.
Thank you.
They can either call or email. They can talk to somebody at the commission to discuss what their experiences have been or their observations, and see if that will then follow through with a complaint or a claim. Absolutely, I can provide them.
One thing I wanted to mention too on the discrimination side is there's a form of discrimination not everyone is familiar with, which is source of income. Source of income discrimination, where you are getting your income from to pay rent. Discriminating against that is illegal. And what I mean by that is having a sign in the window that says no Section 8 vouchers accepted. It does not matter where your income comes from. If it comes from Section 8, if it comes from employment, if you have the income that can afford the rent in an apartment, then the landlord needs to rent you the apartment. And definitely the Human Rights Commission would be helpful in that.
Great, I've dealt with them. They're very accessible, which is great. She said she had reached the Human Rights Organization but received no help. Okay, well, we can further
then
that.
They can call me.
Yes,
then call
okay. Blanca's information will be shared. And Clorinda, I will have your email as well from the Eventbrite, but you can leave it here. You can specifically, I think, pick me to leave it to, but either way, I can email you. So Anne has a question for Blanca. What supports are available to undocumented workers?
So in terms of assisting undocumented families and undocumented workers and documented individuals, we have to be very creative, because funding that we receive, for example, from HUD for our emergency shelter grants or CDBG, which are community development block grants, we cannot provide assistance to people who are not living in this country with the appropriate immigration paperwork. However, what we are doing is one of the housing programs that the county executive announced 2 weeks ago, I think it was, because we've received funding from the COVID relief funds from Congress, we have a landlord or a small landlord program where landlords, whether they are individuals, whether they're nonprofits, whether they're management companies, whatever the case may be, that have buildings between 4 to 20 units, can apply for assistance on behalf of their tenants. This funding, we have about $7.5 million that we are dedicating to this particular program. And it's going to be run in-house, meaning it'll be run by our planning department. So landlords can apply. All the information is on the website. It's at homes.westchestergov.com. They can get the fact sheet, they can get the eligibility, they can also get the application. And there will be a lottery conducted, because we want to make sure that the process is fair, right? So if a landlord has 5 buildings with 20 units each, we want to make sure that it's not that just one landlord that got assistance for all those 5 units because they submitted their application first at bat. So ETPA apartments are also available, and what the tenant will have to do on their behalf is simply sign an attestation showing or confirming the amount that's due, we can pay, I believe, up to 75% of the rental arrearages. However, the default has to be tied to COVID. So if the tenants started falling back on their rent after March 1st, we can assist. But if there was already a renter's arrears before March, we cannot. We designed this program because it would really not require that much documentation from tenants. So all the information is really coming from the landlords with respect to their rent rolls and just, knowing who lives in these units and how much they owe. The other type of creative way that we're trying to assist all of our Westchester County residents, regardless of immigration, is to be able to provide, of immigration status, I should say, is to be able to provide funding, again, through the COVID relief funds for agencies. For example, Hudson Valley Justice Center, they provide legal services to people regardless of immigration status. We know that while there is a moratorium right now in evictions, there will, sooner or later, that moratorium is going to be lifted and there is going to be an eviction crisis. And we want to make sure that everybody who needs legal assistance can have that access. So we are trying to find creative ways of being able to assist. We always partner with the Community Resource Center in Mamaroneck. We're always talking to them about different types of programs or initiatives that we can support. Another way is through the census for funding for census activities. Washingtonville Housing Alliance is also one of the recipients of stabilization funds for eviction prevention. So, and again, with my colleagues, we can always brainstorm of additional things that we can do as long as, we're allowed to. With COVID relief funds, the funds are there to prevent a crisis, right? So there's very few strings attached per se. When it comes to the assistant has to go out there. But if it's funding coming on an annual basis from HUD or from other entity, obviously there's a lot of restrictions attached to those funds.
That's interesting. Thank you I feel like I have so many questions in my head. I want to take one from Karen for Tiffany. Do you have towns that have successfully designed effective public participation processes that include the marginalized in comprehensive plans? So do you have voices of the folks who are not able to live in the area?
That's a great question. And I want to be honest, I think that it's always could get better. Okay, so we all try so hard in the world of public engagement to include as many voices as possible, as creatively as possible. I will say one thing, and I probably can't point to one community that has done this perfectly. It's hard. Every community struggles and every community tries its best to get everyone involved in the conversation. But one thing I want to say is that we have to think outside the box when we do public engagement. It cannot be the typical 7 p.m. meeting, because that meeting might as well be at midnight. This is a dirty secret. I don't participate hardly in my own municipality because, quite frankly, I'm in everybody else's municipality. But the thing is that it is hard to do what we're doing, right? It's hard enough our day to day than to get to 7 p.m. and proactively participate in something that we don't really understand or that's in the future. And so we only come when it's in our backyard, right? Or we're like, oh, we don't like that. So if we're going to do this right and we're going to get new voices involved, and I will say in the recent comprehensive plans that we have looked at and worked on, I think, Terrytown tried very creative methods of reaching out during their comprehensive planning process. The town of Newcastle, where Chappaqua is, they, traditionally, I would say the 20 to 40-year-olds don't participate quite typically, and they really, went aggressive in trying to get a younger group of people out and participating. We have seen in Albany that I've worked in, us going to local high schools and reaching out through the high school level to parents and getting people involved, and having neighborhood picnics where people just came for a picnic in their community, but we talked about comprehensive planning or we talked about zoning. I mean, we sort of trick everyone into it, but
food always does it.
Right, food is, oh yeah, that's key. And I will say recently, I think Poughkeepsie, the city of Poughkeepsie is really striving to be as inclusive as possible in much of their planning decisions that they have been making. I know this is outside of Westchester, but they have, they're working on a comprehensive plan or starting that, but they've done many different planning initiatives, which have focused most recently on the downtown and housing, and revamping parking lots to create a housing stock that is in much need in the city of Poughkeepsie, and really creating like economic centers. And they have a new form-based code. So it's like a lot has come from them doing great, participation and getting voices out there. And I could go on and on. I won't, because I know it's 8:30, but there's definitely we need to go outside the box. We have to bring this to the people. And that's the only way we're going to get voices included in this dialogue. So,
yeah, I will say, I mean, I don't want to run too far over. Gabby, do we have like a second? Do you think? Can we take a little? Sure. I think, I guess my question for you is, maybe it's an amorphous question, if that's the word, but for all three of you, and you could just raise your hand or give like a one sentence answer. Are we struggling more ideologically, over these issues than we are, well, there's not enough land and there's not enough, if we start to really think about dignity and think about community, because we say community, but what is community, right? Can we come to a place where we can make these creative, holistic choices together? Is it red tape, bureaucracy, and not enough land and water in the wrong places, or buildings near the water? Or is it really an ideological issue? Because my gut says that it is, but I guess if you have a one sentence answer.
I have a one-word answer: yes.
Okay.
I agree.
As I said before, or just thinking that through, right? There are ways to convert former office buildings that are sitting vacant. There are ways to to build on top of things creatively. The will to create, it's the will. Solutions are possible, and you can create and should create. Like, zoning is not a bad thing. You should create very defined rules for how this stuff can happen, so that what's built is attractive and quality and well-run and accessible and fair. But you can create rules that do allow for development, that do allow for affordability. It's a matter of will ultimately, and it plays out in all those small ways.
And I think there is an educational component also that needs to happen. Many times we have new elected leaders that serve for 2 years or 4 years, whatever their term is, and they come in, making these decisions, and they don't know what affordable housing is. So consistently, we have to revisit, what does it mean? What does it mean for your community? Why is this good? And I think that if we can put the ideology aside and look at what is best for your community, and not thinking as yourself, but thinking as your neighbors and the children living in the community and the families you represent, I think there are ways to increase affordable housing development everywhere.
Just to think about the will issue, I know we're wrapping up. I think the problem in a place like Westchester is people hear affordable housing and they think it's an issue of the bottom 10%. Look at how crushing the cost of living is in our region. Affordable housing, first of all, is an issue for all of us because it's all our community, but it's also a personal issue for probably the bottom 60% of people that are watching their bills way more closely than comfortable. This is not a niche issue when our median income exceeds $100,000 a year, and it takes much more than that to live comfortably in Westchester. So this is not the issue of this tiny minority trying to create something. This is an issue of all of our friends and neighbors.
Tiffany?
I don't have to add anything.
Okay.
That was just amazing what everyone's saying. So
I think that's,
I'm going to leave it at that.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. And we didn't even get into where people who make between $30,000 and $18,000 a year can live, which I'm really interested in. But I would love to have you all back to get into what Blanca was saying, which is when we look at it, when we look at how it's good for everyone, and it really, really is, what does that look like? And I think that's another hour or an hour and a half that we can spend with you all. And Gabby, if you want to close tonight, that would be amazing. Your time has been precious.
Yes, we are over by 4 minutes, but I just want to say, I think that was a fantastic question to end on, Nicole, and thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you so much to our panelists for lending us your time and your expertise. We will follow up with everybody who joined with all the information you could possibly need, where to rewatch, links, everything. So you'll hear from us, and just thank you, and go relax and hopefully enjoy the rest of your evenings.
Yeah, and please come back. We're gonna come get you.
Yes, and there's we'll send out information for the next in this speaker series. All right.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Thanks.
Have a good night.